Welcome to the Carleena Show, where ordinary people share their hero's journey. I'm your host, Carleena Angwin, and this is episode 34 of the podcast. My guest today is Remi Adeleke, author of Transformed, a Navy SEAL's unlikely journey from the throne of Africa to the streets of the Bronx to defying all odds. Today on the show, Remi shares who he wrote the book for and why he decided to write the book himself and not use a ghostwriter. Remi talks about working with youth and the differences between being a teenager today compared to when he was growing up. We talk about his time as a Navy SEAL, working in human intelligence, and Remi shares how he learned to listen and find common ground with informants. I ask him what it's like to be a lead consultant on the forthcoming Netflix film 6 Underground, and if he could offer youth insight on ways they can find meaning and purpose in their lives. This episode is part of a series that seeks to inspire youth. Included in this series is episode 22, Kevin Hines, suicide survivor, storyteller, and filmmaker. Episode 11 with Veronica Slack, addiction recovery, motherhood, and a message of hope. And finally, episode 10 with Reina Dubose, former Division I basketball player, speaker, and mentor. You can visit the Carleena Show website at carleena.net for a full list of episodes and ways to listen. And now I bring you Remi Adeleke. So when you were writing the book, who did you have in mind? Who were you writing the book for?
Well, initially, I was writing the book for like kids who came from where I came from. And I think that's really apparent in the first few chapters of the book. Like, kids in the inner cities of Compton, the Bronx, Brooklyn, South Side of Chicago, Houston, just different places. I wanted those kids to be able to, and teenagers, to read the story and say, wow, like that's me. And if Remi has walked the life that I walked and has gotten to where he's gotten, then I can achieve the same thing or greater. And so, initially, that's who I was writing the book for. But as I got deeper into the book and I got out of the Bronx and, I got, into the Navy and I began to have different experiences, from relational experiences to, horrible setbacks and just all of the things I went through. I was just like, it began to open up for me. And then I was just like, you know what? I'm writing this book for every single person who's failed at something at some point in their life and has felt like, they will never be able to achieve their dream. And I'm writing this so that when they read it, they will see that I had failed so much, but it was through my failures that I ultimately got to where I'm at today, because I didn't quit. I didn't give up. Yeah. And so I just wanted people to see themselves in the book and just be inspired to never give up on their dream, but also to do the extra hard work that they need to do in order to achieve their dream, because that's the other piece to it. Right. Which a lot of people don't realize, especially, and I try not to hit on the younger generations, but I just, with working with younger people, I find that so many of them have this mindset of, everything's supposed to come to me so fast. I'm just supposed to write an idea for a book and it's supposed to be published like the next day. And if it doesn't publish, then, it's the end of the world. Or I'm supposed to, get a scholarship to play Division I football or basketball, whatever. And if that doesn't happen at all, it's like, no, you gotta put in the work. This is not a microwave world where you could just pop something in a microwave for 5 minutes and, get what you want. You gotta do all the hard work. So anyway, I was writing a book for them as well. And then also for women and when I got towards, I'm not sure how far you've gotten in the book, but
just chapter 3, like halfway through chapter 3. So not very far.
Nah. So as you get deeper in the book, you see I start talking about relationships, and I talk about a specific relationship that I had in the book where I was just emotionally and abusive towards this girl I was dating, and how she kept showing up and she would never leave me, and I cheated on her, I did all of these bad things to her, and as I was writing that part of the book, I was like, you know what, I'm writing this book for that woman that's in the same situation as, and I won't give away the name, wait for everybody to read the book, but as fill in the blank in this book, because I want women to be able to see, you know what, I am a queen. I am smart. I am intelligent. I do not need to put up with some guy who's going to treat me like. And so, when I got to that part of the book, that's what I was writing it for. I was really authentic about that time period. I didn't hold back because I wanted women to see how manipulative I was, and I wanted them to see how I lied and cheated, and if they're in that same type of relationship, I wanted them to question it, themselves and say, you know what, I deserve better, and should I even stay in this relationship? So
yeah. And so the people who have read your book and have talked to you afterwards, what sort of things have they said to you?
I've gotten so much great feedback. One, I read the book in a week, or I read the book in a day. I don't read books, and I and I picked up the book and I flew right through it. So that's one thing I keep hearing is that they flew right through it. Another message I keep getting is how inspiring it is. I'm getting messages from people all over the world, not just in America, saying I'm just inspired to just reach for my dreams. Like, this book has helped me so much to not give up. Because so again, I don't want to go into too much of the book and give it away, but that's another piece. And then also, just the piece about, there's 2 chapters in there where I share a little bit about my faith, and I'm getting a lot of people who are, reaching out to me and saying, I have a renewed sense of faith now. You know what I mean? Like, after reading this book, I never really, or I had faith back in the day, and I lost it. But reading your book and seeing how, you came to faith, and how you've grown, like, it just inspires me, so.
How did you come to faith?
I hit rock bottom. I hit rock bottom. I had absolutely everything. I had girlfriends all over the place. I had money. I had a beautiful place in San Diego. I was, SEAL. I had graduated from SEAL training, and I had too much. And on the outside, everything seemed perfect, but on the inside, I was depressed and empty. And and that's what led me to treat people poorly. Because I was searching for something. So anyway, I explained all in the book, but I hit rock bottom. Just to kind of shorten the shorter version of it. I hit rock bottom, and my brother had been a Christian for a long period of time, and he would always tell me, Remi, when you hit rock bottom, just remember to cry out to Jesus, because I had fluctuated between atheism and agnosticism. And so after I had tried everything and nothing worked for me, while I was going through this battle of depression, I was just like, all right, I'm going to take my brother's advice and cry out to Jesus. And, here I am, this big, bad, tough Navy SEAL who grew up in the Bronx and did all of these things. I'm literally crying out, for help. And that's where the change came for me.
Did you go to a church to find this, or was it on your own, or how did that happen?
No, it didn't start out that way. It was all self-reflection. It was self-reflection. And that's when the process started for me, pretty much out in the wilderness, reflecting on my life. And then later I ended up going to a church and growing in my faith, but it didn't start in the church. It wasn't me going there and hearing a mess sermon or anything like that. It was just me out on my own, and then ultimately that's when I went to church later.
Yeah. So why did you start with the first scene, or for the first chapter of the book? Why did you choose that scene to start your book?
I think I chose it because the title of the book is Transformed. So, the subtitle of the book is A Navy SEAL's Unlikely Journey from the Throne of Africa to the Streets of the Bronx and Defying All Odds. So when you get the book, you're going to know automatically, okay, at some point this guy's going to be a Navy SEAL. Okay. For people who know me from the film and TV industry, I've been in, in 2 movies and TV shows and a few TV shows, a few TV projects and some other stuff. You're going to know, okay, this guy's an actor. He's a writer. He's a Navy SEAL. Just picking up the book, you're going to know that. So I wanted to open up the book with a chapter where that was the polar opposite. Okay, like the polar opposite. Like, here's this guy scamming people, stealing people's information, like the total opposite of the subtitle of the book, right? Because I wanted to make people ask. I wanted to make people ask the question: how did this guy go from chapter 1 to the cover subtitle of the book? Like, I need to get past chapter 1 so I can figure out how this happened, and I need to figure out how this guy got from the cover of the book to chapter 1. Because as you know, chapter 1, doesn't start, it's not the beginning of my story. It's not, 1982, Remi was born here. Yeah. It's, it's in my teenage years. And then, from that chapter, then we go back to the Africa years. And so I wanted to kind of bait people to read more, or for the audiobook listeners to listen more and ask those questions and essentially say to themselves, I need to find out how this guy got to be who he is in chapter 1. And then I need to find out how this guy in chapter 1 later got to where he is now. Right,
so, right. Yeah. And I think that is effective, because that's what hooked me in. And also I love that, that you did your own audio book, and you could hear your voice, and also I think that's really powerful. So that's what I thought you would say, but yeah.
And I'm gonna say something. Doing an audiobook read was one of the hardest things I've done in a long time. I mean,
really? Even more than being a Navy SEAL?
No, not harder, but it was one of the hardest things I've done in a long time. Yeah. Because it's when you read, most of us read quietly, to ourselves, not out loud. And so if you make a mistake as you're reading to yourself, your brain already knows what that right word is. So you just keep going through, Right. But it's not like that when you're doing an audiobook read. Every word has to be perfect. Every syllable has to be perfect. Every comma has to be perfect. Every period has to be perfect. And then on top of that, there's so many different people in the book. So I got to do different accents. And then I got to go from narrative to dialogue to narrative. And so there were times when I had to repeat the same sentence 6-7 times, just to get right. So it was tedious. It was hard. But after the first day, my voice was shot.
So you said that in one of the podcast episodes, you said that you spoke at Rikers Island at their graduation ceremony. So tell me a little bit about that, and tell me what you said to them.
So some of the staff at Rikers Island read my book, and they were just like, wow, this guy's story is a story that can resonate with the inmates who are getting ready to graduate from high school. So they asked me to come speak at the graduation ceremony for the inmates who are getting either their GED or their high school diploma. And so that's how it came about. And then my message was essentially, I am who you guys are. I come from where you come from, and though people make mistakes, that doesn't mean that they don't have potential. And don't think that your life is over, whether you're going to be serving life, because there were guys there who are going to be serving life. They were going to be there, and they for murder, and then they're going to get transported upstate New York for life. There were some people who were going to be doing. There was one kid I spoke to who was getting, that day he was getting shipped upstate for 10 years in prison. So my message to them was, don't allow this present moment to define your future. Find the lessons within that moment to prepare you for the future, and just don't give up. Like, keep striving and keep pursuing your education. And that was another thing I was trying to, hammer home to them was, don't just give up. Keep pursuing your education, because you can get your bachelor's degree, you can get your master's, you can get your PhD, you can get you could do these things, but it's up to you if you want to do them. So that was my message.
Yeah. So then you also work with youth?
Yeah, I work. I work with a nonprofit called City Hope Now, and it's a mentorship organization. And that's just one of the different things they do. They deal with human trafficking and domestic violence advocacy, and my job is mentorship. So I mentor at-risk inner-city youth.
And so, what sort of things are these kids dealing with?
Fatherlessness. Most of them don't have dads in their life. Getting in trouble in school. I mean, there are 4 particular kids who at one school who I mentored, and they are the 4. They're the 4 baddest kids in the school. They always get in trouble for fighting, talking back, not doing their homework, different things of that sort, and so yeah.
And so, what sort of things do you say to them, or how do you mentor them?
Try one by example. I just by example. I try to just be present in their life and show them what it is to be a man. And then obviously a lot of talks, a lot of you shouldn't have done that, or why did you do that? Explain why you did that. Let's find the reasoning behind this so that we can move past this and you don't do it again. So a lot of talks, and just sometimes just spending time with them, playing basketball, showing them that I care about them. I think that that's one of the most important elements of mentorship is showing that I'm not just there to check a box. I'm not just there to say, hey, to pat myself on the back. I'm here because I care about you. And so, even if it's just playing a pickup ball game, a game of basketball with them, even if it's going to dinner with them, just showing that I care about them, and that inspires them, because they're like, man, this guy's a Navy SEAL, this guy's an actor, he's this and that, and he's coming to where I am, and he's spending time with me. That must mean that I am somebody.
Yeah.
My own dad doesn't speak to me. My own dad is not in my life. Like, the fact that this guy is doing that shows that I am somebody. And so I think that's important. So that's what I try to do.
Yeah. And how is being a teenager like now different from when you were growing up?
I think, a lot of teenagers are dealing with a lot of the same issues, from, sexual pressures, like you got to sleep around, you got to hook up, those type of things. Bullying. I mean, we call it bullying now, but back in the day, it was just like it was. We didn't call it bullying, but it was the same thing. So I see that the same. And then just the survival, the mindset of I have to survive. So I'm going to do whatever I need to do to survive, whether it's doing something illegally or whether it's, doing something else, so I think that the pressures are exactly the same. I think that one thing that has changed is the access to technology, and specifically social media. I think that consumes kids a lot more, and now they're really competing against other kids for attention and for likes and for follows and all those different things. So I think that that's the only thing that's really changed is technology. But for the most part, I think that everything is the same from the time I was growing up as a teenager.
Yeah. And so you have 3 boys, right? Are you gonna have them? Are you gonna let them use social media when they're in their teen years?
No. As of now, I know my wife is a doctor, so she has all of the statistics and numbers behind social media and how it's not good for your brain and how it can be a detriment to young kids, especially with their development. So my wife will tell you absolutely not. There is no way. No, and I side with her. I don't think I am until they fully understand it and how to use it. And when I say how to use it the right way, because social media can be used the right way. Unfortunately, it's just been used the wrong way a lot, especially with young people. So until I can really sit down and teach them and they've matured to the point where they can handle it and where it doesn't consume them and their identity is not rooted in it, I'm not going to let them use it.
Yeah. Okay. So another question I have is about bridging the divide and talking to people and having conversations with people who are different from us or think differently from us. And I know a few other vets, and it seems like the military is an institution that represents people from various backgrounds, political affiliations, socioeconomic statuses, and all. And how do you use that knowledge that you gained from the military in your personal life to engage and to converse with people who may think differently or may have a different background?
I just use it. I mean, it's that simple. I just use it. I mean, it's just through osmosis, it's just been absorbed within my system. So it's just, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out the best way to answer the question, but I just apply what I learn. I mean, I don't know if that's answering your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe if you can give an example of how, because, there is a lot of divide. We hear on the news, there's a lot of divide. There's a lot of, political tension and all, people that don't want to talk to someone else who's a different, political affiliation. So how do you have a conversation, or how do you engage somebody, or how do you look at because it seems like you, just from the conversations I've heard you have, you sort of just get along with everybody.
Yeah, I do.
So how do you do that? What advice can you give?
Well, one is, first and foremost, I'm accepting of all people. Mm-hmm. I think that's it goes back to past the military. My mom just raised me that way, to be accepting of all people. Mm-hmm. And I grew up in the Bronx, so I grew up around Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, Asians. I grew up in New York City is very diverse. I think it's one of the most diverse cities in the world and in the country. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up around, people of different sexual orientations. I grew up around, people of not necessarily like different financial status, because everybody in the Bronx was all about the same financial status. But I grew up around people from different backgrounds. And so I think that, when I got into the military and I was further exposed to people from different backgrounds, that was normal for me. And then, I traveled all around the world, and, I was able to experience different cultures and learn from different cultures, and especially in the Middle East, the way they do things in the Middle East is completely different. So it forced me to be accepting of ways that I didn't always agree with, but respect it, because it was just the way business was done in those particular countries. And so it's just been it's been part of my fabric. It's been part of my DNA and who I am, to just, one, be accepting of all people, regardless of whether I agree with them or disagree with them. And then two, just be open to hearing the perspective of another person or another group. Mm-hmm. And in my job in the military, I worked in human intelligence. So I had to, without going into too much detail, I had to have a lot of conversations with I ran sources. So we call them informants over here. Overseas, we call them sources. Mm-hmm. So I had to use sources in order to acquire information. And based off that information, we would go on missions. And so part of that was I had to listen, and I had to be willing to listen, so that I was assimilating the information appropriately, because the information that I was getting, if there was a slight bias within me that was skewing the information, then that could affect whether we went on a mission, whether we not went on a mission, whether lives were saved, whether lives were not saved, whether I was putting my team in danger or not. So I couldn't put a spin on the information I was receiving. And so, I just learned, I take that with me, where I just learned to listen. To listen to people. And I may not agree with them, but you know what? There is always some truth, within something somebody's trying to relay to me, whether I agree with it or not. And so I just try to find that truth and find that common ground, which brings me to the next point, is common ground. One thing that I had to learn in human intelligence was building that common ground. And whether I disagree with somebody or not, there is something that we believe in, collectively. There is something. So let's find that something, and let's start from there, and then work our way out. So finding common ground, and I don't know. So those are the first three that come to mind.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Could you talk at all about what you did you said with human intelligence? Is that what you did?
Yeah, so I was a SEAL. So first and foremost, I was, I did, different type of missions that SEALs do. But part of my specialty within the SEAL teams was human intelligence. We call it HUMINT. HUMINT, it sounds like, but it actually stands for human intelligence. And and so what that entailed was, collecting intelligence, human intelligence, which meant meeting with people and running sources and, collecting intel and then using other means to collect intel, some means that I can't really go into detail. And
Okay.
and then using that information to go on missions. So I wasn't the guy who was told, you go here and there's a bad guy here and go get that bad guy, right? And then not just blindly go out and do it. I was the guy that was going out and getting the information. And then obviously, vetting that information against other people who are also, collecting information and vetting that information with other agencies to make sure that information was accurate, and then doing research, reading other reports as it related to the information that I had just received to make sure that there was some type of trend or there was a connection. So that's kind of what I did.
Okay. Yeah. So now you have a new Netflix show that's coming out. Is it in the fall?
It's spring, and it's a film. I was hired as a lead consultant on the film, but it's a action comedy on Netflix, and it comes out December of this year. And I do have a role in it. I have a small role in that. As a matter of fact, I had to do some voiceover work for it last night. But I do have a role in it. But most of my time on set was spent as a consultant.
So, what is the name of the show or the film?
It's going to be called 6 Underground.
6 Underground. So tell me what it's like to be a consultant on a show like that.
Well, it's fun. You get to do a little bit of everything, So I was on set for a lot of the action scenes, which was cool, and I was right there with the director, and there were times when he was just like, is that right? The way they would do that movement, or the way, that guy would handle that gun, or what that bad guy would do, or, so I would deal with that. And there were times where, Ryan Reynolds and myself and the director were standing there, and Ryan was just like, hey, these lines, like, is something off about these lines? What do you think? Is that something that would be said, or how can we say it to make it more authentic? And I would kind of come up with something and make it more authentic and give it to them, and they would run with that. So I did that, and then I would work with the costume department to make sure that the wardrobe was tactically sound. I would work with the props department to make sure that the props were tactically sound and realistic, and so I worked with different departments just to kind of make the film as realistic as possible.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of something that they had in the script and you said, well, no, let's do it this way, or it would be more like this? Can you give me an example?
Oh, no, I'll get in trouble.
Oh, okay.
after the film comes out, I can, but not now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You said it's coming out in December of this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Okay. Let's see. So tell me about your mentors and kind of when they appeared in your life and what significance they had to you.
Mentors. I mean, I started having mentors as soon as I joined the military.
Yeah.
I had mentors before I joined the military, but those mentors were negative, more negative influences than positive influences. But
like how so?
But yeah. Well, just not having a father, I was, a lot of my mentors were, for the most part, media and hip hop culture. And, I just consumed it. And I thought that, listening to rappers talk about selling drugs, I thought that was the right thing to do. So I did it, listening to rappers talk about, sleeping around with multiple women and being a player. And if you're not doing that, you're a soft cornball. I listened to that, and that's what I did. I slept around with multiple girls, listen to guys who talked about punching people in the face if they disrespect you. I went and followed suit. So that's what I mean by I had negative mentors, because they were giving me a false blueprint of what it meant to be a man. and I followed it. And then it wasn't until I joined the military that, I began to learn about honor, courage, and commitment. I began to learn about following orders and being on time and keeping my word and just all of those things through other mentors. And then when I got to SEAL training, then, the ante was definitely upped, so to speak. And the SEAL, my BUDS instructors became my mentors. And then when I got to my SEAL team, guys who were senior to me became my mentors. And then it just kept on growing from there. And then when I got out of the SEAL team, I had, still had mentors who had mentors in business who would mentor me in different realms. So, yeah.
What about in one of your podcast episodes, you mentioned that there are some women in your life who kind of helped you out or who saw something in you, and can you talk about them?
Yeah. That was one thing that I discovered in writing the book is throughout my life, there were so many women who came along the way that kind of opened the door for me to get me to where I am today. And one being my mom, first and foremost, who did so much for me, raising me and my brother by herself. The second person was my Aunt Doki, who, helped my mom. And then my grandmother, who helped my mom raise me. And then there's my recruiter, who, when I had two warrants out for my arrest, she snuck me into the Navy, took me to judges to get my record clear so I could join the Navy. And if it wasn't for her, who knows where I would be. And then, jump from there to my HM2 Brown, who allowed me to change my schedule so that I could work out to acquire the skills and the qualifications I needed just to get into SEAL training. And, the list goes on and on and on, to Kathy Lee Gifford, who walked me to my publisher, HarperCollins, and told them, you better sign this guy to a book deal right now before I take him to a publisher who will. And so, throughout my life, I've had women who just came in and they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time. And they just, gave me the push or opened the door that was needed for me to get to where I'm at today.
Yeah. And how did you and your wife meet?
Match.com.
Oh, yeah? That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I met my significant other on Match.com as well. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So were you both living in San Diego at the time?
She had just moved to San Diego, I want to say 2 months earlier. No, like a month. No, like a few weeks earlier. Where, I had been single for 3 years, and I had decided, after being single, all right, I think I'm ready to meet my wife. Not a girlfriend, not like a hookup, but I'm ready to meet my wife. And I knew I didn't want to go to a club to meet my wife. I knew I didn't want to go to a bar or anything like that. And I was like, let me try Match.com. So I did a 30-day trial, and the last week of my 30-day trial was the first week of her 30-day trial because she had just, and she set her Match.com profile because she had just moved to San Diego because she's a doctor, so she was in residency at the time. She got accepted into a residency program, so that's why she moved to San Diego. So she had just moved there. We met.
Okay. So when did you start writing your book?
I started in October of 2000 and let's see, where are we now? 17.
October 2017, that's when you started writing it. And then when did you finish the first draft?
I finished March 8th, 2018. And I took, there's a whole lot to the story. My mom started out as a writer. She started in August, though. And, after 2 months, I was just like, this is not my voice. It's not who I am. I need to write this story. So I started all over for the most part. Oh, so
your mom started writing the book?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me about that.
But she started, but it wasn't like, she's a great writer, a fantastic writer. But as I read, I was just like, this is not my story. It's being told more from her perspective. It wasn't being told from my perspective. Right. And so that's why I was just like, I need to do this. I need to be the writer on this. And so I started writing, started all over. Started writing. I got halfway through. When I was halfway on about chapter 14, the publisher concerned that this book is going to turn into a 200,000 word book. And I was just like, wait, what? Like, there's no way it's going to be a 200,000 word book. I know the way I do things, and it's not going to be a 200,000 word book. And that made me ask the question, well, what is my limit? because I didn't know what my limit was. And they said, well, you signed your contract was for 60 to 80,000 words. Your book can't be more than 80,000 words. And I said to myself, there's no way I could tell the story in 80,000 words. That's ridiculous. I would have to paraphrase every part of the book. So I fought them for about a week and a half, and I was just like, there's no way I'm writing a 80,000 word book. And finally they capitulated and said, okay, you can write a book, but it can't be more than 130,000 words. And on top of that, you have to hire a ghostwriter. So I said, all right. So I went to go find a ghostwriter, found a ghostwriter. Well, I stopped writing, found a ghostwriter, hired him. And then a month later, this is December, so like December 20th of 2017. So a month later, January 26th of 2018, he calls me up and he's like, hey, I wrote 3 chapters, which was 15, 16, 17. I was like, great. He said, how do you want to do this? You want to get on the phone and talk about this? I said, yeah, let's do it that way. So, he sent me the 3 chapters. I wait for him to call me. He calls me, and then I start reading. I read the first line. I'm like, nope. I read the second line. I'm like, nope. I read the third line. I'm just like, this is horrible. This is not like, and the writing was so bad. I had to ask him, hey, did you read the first half of the book, which I had already written? And he said, no. And I said, dude, how can you tell the second half of a story when you don't even know the first half of the story? He's like, yeah, I know, but I didn't want to be influenced by your voice. And I said, that's crazy, but because you're supposed to be influenced by my voice so that you could tell the story. And it reads like one story, not 2 different stories. And he's like, yeah, I know. So anyway, long story short, I told him, hey, read the last half of the book, and I'm going to rewrite this chapter 15. And we'll talk again in the morning. So we did the next morning, and I had sent him chapter 15 before we got on the phone. He read it. He was just like, Remi, he's like, did you write the first half of the book? I was like, yeah. He's like, did you write that chapter you sent me last night? I said, yeah. He said, dude, you're a great writer. And he was just like, I don't know why your publisher told you needed to hire a ghostwriter. He's like, you need to write this book. He's like, I've been a writer for 30 years, and I've never lost a job. I've never quit on a job, but I'm quitting now because I need you to know that you need to write this book. No one else needs to tell the story but you. And I was like, great. So I fired him and called my publisher and told him I fired the ghostwriter and I'm writing this myself. And they freaked out, and they were just like, oh, we're not going to have a book. This is not where, they freaked out. And I didn't listen to them, and I just kept writing. And so I wrote the book. I had 5 weeks to finish the book. This was January 26th. My due date to turn it in was March 15th. And I turned it in on March 8th. I had finished the book. So I wrote the whole book in 4 months total.
Wow.
And when I wrote it and when I turned it into him, the woman the vice president who gave me so much hassle sent me a private email. She was like, this is a great read. It's great writing after all we went through, like all the fights we had. Like, I'm just pleased to tell you that I'm so pleased with this book. Like, I didn't expect it to turn out like this. She's like, we're looking forward to what this book is going to do. And that's how it all came together.
Wow. So before writing the book, had you written articles or short stories or anything? So you just sat down and wrote it.
Yeah. You know, what helped me, one, and I talk about this in the book, you haven't got to the part yet, but when I was a kid, my mom would make my brother and I read the New York Times and then read articles, read books and write reports. You know, she would make us do it for punishment, and then she would also make us do it when we were in trouble. And so that's where I got the foundational principles of writing. And then fast forward to when I got into the SEAL teams, as I said, I did a lot of intelligence, and that required a lot of writing. Because every time I had a meeting with somebody, I had to write a detailed report in some type of story form, because somebody had to be able to pick up the report and read it as though it was written that day, or those events happened that day. And so that's where I really learned visual writing. Like, how do I write in a way where people are not just reading, but they're seeing what they're writing. They're seeing the images. They're seeing the world. They're seeing the people that are in the story. And so that's where my writing was further enhanced. And then at the time, before I started writing, I was before like a month before I signed my publishing deal, I enrolled in the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute. And I was there from early July, like the first week of July until December, and until January. And so I had learned so much about storytelling because we had to read scripts, and we had to. So I had to understand story arcs. I had to understand the meaning behind the writing, because I was acting out what I was reading. I had to do improv classes. I had to do scene study classes, and all of those classes helped me tremendously as a writer. Like, I'm thinking I'm just going there to learn how to be a better actor, but I went there and I learned how to be a better storyteller. And then fast forward, I would just listen as I was writing. I would just listen to different videos as I worked out, like how do you tell a story, like writing organically, like story structure. Like, I would just listen as I wrote, and that's what helped me, you know. So and then on top of that, I went to grad school. You know, I got my bachelor's and my master's in organizational strategy. So obviously, you know, to graduate school, you got to write a lot of papers. So my master's is not in English or literature or writing, but I did have to do a lot of writing. So that helped me too.
Right. Did you outline the story before you wrote it, or did you just write it?
I started out with an outline, and I would say after the second chapter, that outline completely changed. And I'm writing I've written other projects since then, and I'm currently writing a project right now that I need to get done by next week. And one thing that I found is that I am not one to outline, because I've done it and it doesn't work for me. Because I'm more of an organic storyteller, and what I mean by that is I like to let the story tell the story, instead of follow a structure, because there are certain places a story wants to go, especially if it's good writing or good storytelling. And if you have an outline, you're forcing the story into that outline. So you're fighting against the story. And so what helped me so much in the book was, you know, I had the outline, and there were times where I was just like, I need to stick to this outline. Like, I need to have this story in here. And it just never worked. There were times where I would force a story that I had outlined into a particular part of the book, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work at all. Yeah. And so, you know, I just learned the importance of writing organic. Now, for some people that it works, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, rule number 506 as it relates to writing, never outline. Like, it works for some people, but for me, and because of the way my mind works, and I have all these ideas, especially in writing my book, you know, I had to it's my book, it's my life. You know, there's so many stories that are in my mind, you know, and I think, you know, outlining works. I think it works for a person who, like, if somebody else was writing my book, then that outline would probably work, because they're taking, because, you know, my brain is not in their head. So they don't know that, you know, when I talk about this relationship, you know, oh, there was another relationship that I remembered as I'm writing about one relationship A. Oh, I remember a relationship Z and how relationship Z affected relationship A. So I need to bring that up so I could tie that into that story. They don't know that because they've never lived my life. Right. You know, so all they know is what is what's been outlined or what I've shared with them. And so again, you know, writing organically really helped me to be free and remember those stories that came to me. That I forgot when I was doing the outline process, you know, and go down roads that I never would have gone down, but that just popped up as I was writing. Right. Yeah.
Was your mom a first reader, or did she edit a version of your book?
No, she didn't do any editing. She did read it. Yeah, she did read it after I finished it, and she was just like, "This is a great book," and I turned it into the publisher, and it all worked out.
What other comments did she have, or was there anything that surprised her, or anything?
She was like, "You're crazy." And she was just like, "I knew you were a bad kid, but I didn't know how bad you were." She was like, "You are crazy."
Oh, so she learned about what you were up to in your youth by reading your book?
Yeah. All the stuff I hid from her.
Did you surprise yourself that you could write a first draft so quickly, or was that?
No, because I didn't know how long it usually takes to write a first draft.
I mean, I know people it's taken 10 years.
You gotta understand, I'm coming into this process naive. I'm coming into this process which I think was good. Yeah. Because I think if I would have known that, because I hear people when I tell them I wrote it in 4 months, they're like, "What? You wrote the book in 4 months?" I'm like, "Yeah, I just wrote it in 4 months." It's like, it takes like a year or 2 years to write a book. You wrote it in 4 months, and it's a long book. I can't. I'm glad I didn't know that, because that would have messed me up probably. But it probably would have really screwed me up. But no, I didn't. I just wrote. So, it didn't surprise me. I was just like, oh, this is what you do. You sit down, you tell a story, and you get done, and you move on. Mm-hmm.
So you have very good discipline. It sounds like.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. And I had to, because I had a due date. Mm-hmm. It was March 15th, mm-hmm. and I had lost a month because, again, I took a month off to let that writer write, and and so I was behind, and so like literally there were times when I would stay up until 3 a.m, writing.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad that you stood your ground and said that you were going to write it, because your voice definitely comes through. I mean, your voice comes through because you're narrating it, but also it's just like the dialogue you use, and then just the way that you're thinking and the way that you make connections and you bring in backstory and all. It's all very you, which I appreciate. And so I feel like, and I'm pretty naive as far as, who uses ghostwriters, and because they don't announce it. So I feel like
most people do.
Now that you say this, I feel like other books that I've read, they were pretty bland. And now I'm thinking maybe a ghostwriter wrote it because they really didn't know the person. So So,
because so many things come to you as you write. So many things come to you, ideas, things you said. And then another thing I did was I interviewed people. When I came across a story, I was just like, man, this story needs to be in a book. Like, I remember when this happened. And there were people that were attached to a particular story. I would call them up. And I would say, hey, dude, remember when we were doing this and that girl, like, tell me what happened. Like, I remember it happened this way. How do you remember it happened? And they would say, oh, yeah, it happened like that. But remember, this happened too. And I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot all about that. And he's like, yeah, and then you said this, and then you said that. And I was just like, yeah, I'm going to put that in. So I interviewed. I don't want to give away too much because you haven't gotten deep into the book yet, but most of the people who I mentioned in the book, I interviewed them. Like even my dad's mentee, I interviewed him for the early chapters of my book to really understand what happened with my dad's property and all that stuff.
Right.
So Deshaun, I interviewed him, and he told me so many stories, like I couldn't even fit, because he was doing the cell phone scan with me, and so I interviewed him. I interviewed Charles. I interviewed the guy who cut my hair. Like, I interviewed my ex-girlfriend, who you'll meet later in the book. I interviewed people I went through SEAL training with, like all because and so many things came up because, again, I was open.
Yeah. Well, I just have a couple more questions. The next one is, so what would you say to someone who wants to start writing?
Well, it depends on what they want to write.
Well, okay, so
blog,
let's say, let me be more specific. Someone maybe that you speak to at the jail, or the youth that you mentor, or anybody who has, this compelling story of struggle or overcoming adversity. How would you, how would you recommend they get started?
For writing a book or a film?
A book or anything.
One, research. I'm writing, I've transitioned from writing books into writing films now. And the same rule applies to both. You have to research. You have to interview people. Like, there are parts of my book, obviously it's my story, but I still went back and researched places that I lived. I researched streets that I would run past. I researched people who were part of my life. I researched certain things as it related to the military, even though I had served in the military for 13 years. And what that did was, again, it gave me freedom, but it opened up the world to me and it refreshed my memory. So the first thing I would say to people is you need to research. I could tell lazy writing. I could tell when a person doesn't research because the writing just reads in a lazy way. It's bland. It's there's no depth to it at all. So you got to research. That's the first thing. And then not just research up front, but you got to be willing to research throughout, and not as extensive as up front. But like, there are times when I will spend I'll write a 1-page scene, but I'll spend 2 hours doing research to make sure everything in that scene is as accurate as possible. And that's something that I did with my book. There were stories where I was just like, I remember this thing happening this way, but I need to do research to make sure everything is as accurate as possible. So that's the first thing. Second thing I would tell them is find what works for you. Find what works for you. If outlining works for you, outline. If writing organically works for you, write organically. And don't be afraid to try different methods of writing. Don't be afraid of speaking out your dialogue, because that might work for you. But don't be afraid of not speaking out your dialogue. Don't be afraid of, sharing a chapter with somebody you trust when you finish it to get their feedback before you move on. But also don't be afraid to not do that, to wait until it's all done. So don't feel constricted by the rules is one thing I'll say. And then write. I mean, I know this is a simple piece of advice, but you just got to put pen to paper. You got to sit at the computer and stare at that blinking cursor, for hours and hours. It's like a muscle. It literally is. It's like writing is. It's like a muscle. The more you work it, the better you will get at it. But writing is also tough. It's really, really hard. And so you got to be willing to do the hard work and stretch yourself. So write. That's the only way you get better.
Okay. Good. And then the final question is, and this would be directed towards the youth, which would be how can the youth find meaning and purpose in their lives?
How can you find meaning and purpose in their lives?
Maybe youth that are struggling, or
for me, as a Christian man, you know what I mean? For me, my identity is rooted in Christ. It's rooted in my faith. You know what I mean? And so, when I was younger, I struggled to find my purpose, and it wasn't until I came to faith that I knew my purpose. I was like, I know my purpose. And my purpose was, I was put on this planet to be a blessing to people. I was placed on this planet to be a light, to help people, to guide people, to strengthen people. And so when I realized that purpose, then my life became more fulfilled. And so for me as a person of faith, you know what I mean? That's what I say, you know what I mean? How you find purpose, pray, seek after the Lord, and allow him to guide you. So that's the first answer I could give. The second thing I could give is, try different things, be open to different concepts. I never thought that I was going to be an actor. I never had a desire to be an actor. But when the phone call came and I was in grad school writing papers, I was just like, all right, it's not what I want to do, but let me try it out and see where it goes. And, it ended up working out for me. And now I can go on another example, a less glamorous example. I didn't want to join the military. I hated the military. I really hated the military. I wanted to be a rapper. You know what I mean? But you know what? When I joined the military, I started out as an E2 at the bottom of the totem pole, and I worked my way up, and I ended up loving the military. So be open, because what you despise might end up being your purpose. And, again, hard work, you know what I mean? Just work hard, that'll help you discover your purpose and as well. So,
yeah. Good. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention or anything else you wanted to share before we conclude the interview?
Oh, no, that's it. Unless you got something you want to touch on.
No, that's good. Well, thank you so much, Remi. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from you, and it was great talking to you.
Same here. Great talking to you too, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
All right now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.